Ethan Carter wasn't anyone special, or so he often told himself. At 28, he worked as an assistant floor manager at Kensley Department Store, a sprawling, upscale retail chain in downtown Seattle. His days were long and rigid, filled with inventory checklists, irate customers, and supervisors who measured value by how still your tie sat and how fake your smile was. Ethan wasn't a man of flair or grand ambition. But he was dependable, always the first to arrive, last to leave. He was the guy who fixed the broken coffee machine before anyone noticed it was out of order. He wasn't looking for praise, only a sense of meaning in a world that often felt devoid of it. Each morning, Ethan took the same bus route through 3rd Avenue, and every morning, at precisely 7:38 a.m., the bus stopped at Pine Street. It was here he first noticed Calvin, a weathered man in his 60s, grizzled and hunched under a fading army jacket. Most passengers looked past him, their eyes trained on their phones, but Ethan always nodded. Sometimes he brought him coffee. Other times, a protein bar. Calvin rarely spoke, but when he did, his voice carried the weight of 1,000 untold stories. Back in the fluorescent-lit maze of Kensley's floors, Ethan was a ghost to most of the upper staff. His manager, Miranda Thorne, treated empathy like a disease, contagious and unproductive. She once docked Ethan for overstepping when he helped an elderly woman carry her bags out to a cab. "We're here to sell luxury, not play Boy Scout," she had snapped. Still, Ethan remained loyal. Rent in Seattle wasn't forgiving, and he needed every cent. His apartment was modest, barely enough room for him and his rescue dog, Juno, but it was home. Nights were quiet, often spent sketching. Art had been his secret dream once, buried beneath practicality and a string of disappointments. But something had shifted lately. He couldn't name it, but he felt it, like the silent buildup of static before a storm. Calvin had started talking more, telling Ethan about his lost daughter, his days as a jazz musician, his regrets. One morning, Calvin looked Ethan in the eyes and said, "You don't belong here, you know. You've got too much heart for a place that wants it buried." The words clung to Ethan, echoing even amid the store's sterile greetings and scripted upsells. Then came the first strange encounter. It was a Wednesday. Light rain misted over the city. Ethan was restocking colognes when a woman in a gray trench coat approached him. She didn't ask for a product or a refund. Instead, she stared at him and said quietly, "You're going to be faced with a decision soon. Don't be afraid to choose your soul." Before he could respond, she walked away, disappearing into the crowd like a wisp of fog. Ethan laughed it off at first. Maybe she was confused. Or unwell. But something about her tone, solemn, certain, stayed with him. That night, he couldn't sleep. Was it a warning? A prophecy? The next day, everything felt sharper. He noticed how Miranda scowled at a new trainee for offering a customer directions to a cheaper section. He noticed how exhausted the janitor, Marco, looked after cleaning vomit in the kids' department, and how no one offered him help. The world around him hadn't changed. But Ethan had started seeing it differently. On Friday morning, the moment that would change his life began with a plastic bag, a torn pair of shoes, and a freezing wind. He had spotted Calvin curled beside the entrance of Kensley's back-loading dock, shivering. The old man looked paler than usual, barely conscious. Ethan's heart sank. Without thinking, he took off his store-issued overcoat and wrapped it around Calvin. Then he slipped him a protein bar and went inside to grab a hot drink. He even risked sneaking him into the employee break room through the back entrance, where he gave Calvin a place to rest for a few hours before escorting him out after shift change. What Ethan didn't realize was that the entire incident had been caught on the store's security cameras. By Monday, it was the talk of the staff WhatsApp group. And by Tuesday, he was sitting across from Miranda in the HR office, being handed a termination letter. For bringing a homeless man into the store? Ethan asked, bewildered. For violating security protocol. For endangering the store's sanitary conditions. For poor judgment. Miranda listed flatly. But he's a human being, Ethan protested. This is a business, Mr. Carter. Not a charity. That night, Ethan sat on the curb outside the store, a cardboard box of his belongings on his lap, staring at the sidewalk where Calvin usually sat. But Calvin was gone. He had been fired for an act of kindness. And all he could think was, why does this world punish compassion? Just as he was about to head home, his phone buzzed with an unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but he did. A calm, authoritative voice spoke. "Mr. Carter? This is Jacqueline Rhodes, CEO of Kensley Corporation. I believe we need to talk immediately." The wind stopped. The world tilted. Ethan's thumb hovered over the end call button. Was it a prank? "Mr. Carter?" the voice repeated. "Yes, this is Ethan," he said cautiously. "I understand you were terminated this morning," said Jacqueline Rhodes, CEO of Kensley Corporation. Her voice was polished, yet edged with intensity. "I'd like to hear your side of the story in person. Can you be at the Rhombus Tower by 10 a.m. tomorrow?" Yes. Of course," Ethan stammered. The call ended without ceremony. He sat motionless for a moment, phone still in hand, stunned. Why would the CEO of a billion-dollar company want to speak to him? A low-level manager just fired for helping a homeless man. The next morning, Ethan walked into the Rhombus Tower, the Kensley Corporation headquarters, clutching a borrowed blazer and anxiety. He was greeted by a sharply dressed assistant named Ava Lynn, who offered him water and escorted him to a minimalist, glass-walled office overlooking the Seattle skyline. Jacqueline Rhodes entered moments later. She was striking, silver hair tied back, navy pantsuit crisp and commanding. But it was her eyes that held Ethan. They weren't cold. They were searching. "I saw the footage," she said, gesturing to a tablet on her desk. "You brought a homeless man into the break room. Gave him your coat. Got fired for it." Ethan nodded, unsure what to say. "I also saw something else," she added. "I saw the kind of person we need more of in this company." His confusion deepened. "I've been quietly evaluating store operations," she continued. "Too many of our managers prioritize performance metrics over human decency. That's not the legacy I want for Kensley." Ethan blinked. "So, you're not upset?" "Oh, I'm furious," she said, a wry smile curling. "But not at you." She leaned forward. "I want you to come work for me. At headquarters. Corporate Ethics and Social Impact Division. We're launching a pilot initiative. You'll be the field lead." Ethan stared at her, stunned. "But I was fired." "Exactly," Jacqueline said. "And sometimes, the ones who get fired are the only ones brave enough to do what's right." He left the meeting reeling. Was this real? Just a day ago, he was a disgraced employee. Now, he was being offered a position that didn't even exist on the public org chart. He didn't tell anyone about the meeting, not even Marco, the janitor who'd become a close friend. Something in Jacqueline's demeanor warned him to be cautious. Whatever was happening, it was bigger than him. The following week, Ethan was flown to San Francisco for a leadership seminar. The pilot initiative turned out to be a radical new program to integrate corporate support for the homeless into Kensley's urban operations. Ethan was given a laptop, a corporate apartment, and a team of 3. But strange things started happening. One morning, his email inbox was wiped clean, then restored 5 minutes later. Another day, he found a USB stick on his desk with no note. When he opened it, it contained surveillance footage, not of Calvin this time, but of Miranda and several store managers laughing while shredding employee complaints. Why would someone send that to him? He forwarded it to Jacqueline, but received no response. Instead, he was summoned back to Seattle for a strategy review. When he returned to Rhombus Tower, Ava met him at the elevator. "Something's changed," she whispered, eyes flicking toward the tinted windows. "What do you mean?" "There are people on the board who aren't happy about your program." A chill ran through Ethan. "Why?" "Because it threatens the illusion." Inside Jacqueline's office, the mood was tense. She handed Ethan a folder marked confidential. Inside were internal memos, old ones, about Kensley's efforts to discourage the presence of homeless individuals near their retail locations. One memo explicitly approved the installation of sharp metal dividers on benches outside stores. "This isn't just about you helping a man," Jacqueline said quietly. "It's about us confronting what we've ignored for too long." Ethan's stomach turned. This was bigger than he imagined. "I didn't come here to be a whistleblower," he muttered. "No," she replied. "You came here because you still believe kindness matters. That's why we're going to need you stronger than ever." That night, Ethan received a message from an unknown number. "Careful who you trust. Not everyone at the top wants change." His breath caught. He wasn't just navigating a corporate initiative anymore. He was in the middle of a power struggle, one that reached into the very core of Kensley Corp. He thought about Calvin. Where was he now? Why hadn't he seen him since that day? Something wasn't right. The next morning, Ethan returned to the block where he'd first met Calvin. He asked around. Most shrugged. A few remembered him. One store clerk said she'd seen Calvin get picked up by a black SUV 2 days before Ethan was fired. A black SUV? Ethan's pulse quickened. He started making inquiries, quietly. A friend from his old job connected him with someone in private security. It took a few days, but eventually, he received a name, Michael Harrow, a private consultant frequently hired by large corporations to handle urban disturbances. Ethan felt sick. Was Calvin removed deliberately? Was helping him not just frowned upon, but a threat? He took everything to Jacqueline. She read the files in silence. When she finally looked up, her face was grim. "I need to tell you something," she said. "But it can't leave this room." Jacqueline closed the blinds in her office and locked the door. Then, with a gravity Ethan had never seen in her before, she spoke. 5 years ago, the board approved a covert partnership with a firm called Harborstone Analytics. On paper, they handle security consulting. In reality, they track, document, and remove undesirable individuals from areas near our high-revenue stores. Homeless, mentally ill, undocumented, anyone who might disrupt the shopping experience. Ethan felt the air leave his lungs. "And Calvin?" he asked. Her jaw tightened. "Likely flagged. Moved. God knows where." "You knew this was happening?" "No," she said sharply. "Not until a month ago. That's why I created the pilot program. To expose it from within, slowly, without triggering a legal or media disaster. But I didn't expect the board to act so fast. They're trying to shut us down before we get too close." Ethan stood up, fists clenched. "We can't let that happen." "I agree," Jacqueline said, sliding a new folder across the desk. "Here's what I need from you. Find Calvin, bring him back, and document everything. If we can prove that a private company forcibly relocated him under our name, we can take this to court. But we need irrefutable evidence." Ethan opened the folder. It contained addresses, potential holding sites, and a burner phone. He was being asked to become more than a program lead. He was about to be an investigator, maybe even a whistleblower. That night, he packed a duffel and drove south out of Seattle. The first address led him to a fenced facility outside Tacoma, officially registered as a rehabilitation center. It had no public website, no staff list, no signage beyond a generic front gate that read Hopewell Services. Ethan parked across the street, watching from his car. Around midnight, a van pulled up. 2 men exited, unloading a frail-looking man with a hood over his head. Ethan's breath caught. He couldn't be sure it was Calvin, but the posture, the shuffle, was familiar. He snapped photos, recorded the van's plates, then slipped away. Over the next 2 days, Ethan followed the van to 2 more sites. Each time, more people were dropped off, always at night, always with faces hidden. He sent everything to Jacqueline, but her responses grew slower. Then silence. Ava texted, "Jacqueline's been placed on indefinite leave. Board says stress-related. Be careful." Ethan's world tilted again. He returned to Seattle only to find his access badges revoked, his company laptop wiped. He wasn't just out of the loop, he was being erased. Marco met him in a cafe that night, nervous and quiet. "I heard some things," he whispered. "They're calling you a liability. Word is, someone from Harborstone requested an internal investigation on you." "Let them," Ethan said, anger rising. "I'm not the one breaking the law." Marco slid an envelope across the table. "You didn't get this from me." Inside was a list of dates and locations, surveillance sweeps commissioned by Harborstone. One entry caught his eye, Warehouse 42A, Harbor District, March 4th, 11:45 p.m. That was the night Calvin disappeared. Ethan drove to the warehouse the next day. The building was massive, mostly vacant except for a few freight offices. He walked the perimeter, snapping photos, pretending to be a real estate scout. Then he saw it, a small, barred holding area in the back, barely visible through a mesh grate. Inside sat a single, rusted wheelchair, the same kind Calvin had used. He broke into tears. This wasn't just about helping a man anymore. It was about exposing an entire system built on invisibility. He made a decision. He would go public, but not recklessly. He contacted a local investigative journalist, Maya Jensen, known for exposing corporate fraud. She agreed to meet. He handed her the files, the footage, the testimony. She sat in stunned silence. "You realize what this could do, right?" she asked. "I hope it breaks everything," Ethan said, "because none of it should still be standing." As Maya prepared her report, Ethan went back to the shelter he first found Calvin near. A volunteer named Rosa recognized him. "You're looking for the quiet man with a red scarf, aren't you?" she asked. "Yes," Ethan said. "You saw him? He came back 2 nights ago."
Weak. Scared.
Said he'd escaped. "I let him sleep in the basement, but this morning, he was gone. Gone again." But this time, at least Ethan knew Calvin was alive. He passed the information to Maya. She put out a silent call to local clinics and shelters. Within hours, someone responded. Calvin was at Harborview Medical Center. Ethan rushed there. And when he arrived, room 313 nearly broke him. Calvin lay on the hospital bed, thinner than ever, with bruises on his arms and tape over healing injection marks. But his eyes lit up when he saw Ethan. "You came back," he whispered. "Of course I did," Ethan said, taking his hand. "They're not going to erase you." Ethan sat by Calvin's bedside as the beeping of the heart monitor pulsed steadily in the background. For the first time in days, there was quiet. "I didn't mean to disappear," Calvin whispered. "They took me. Said I was a security concern. One moment I was outside the cafe, the next I woke up in a van." "Did they hurt you?" "They didn't have to. They just erased me. No name. No rights. Like I didn't matter." Ethan squeezed his hand. "You do matter. And we're not done yet." That night, Ethan uploaded all the documents, the photos, videos, audio recordings, to a secure folder. Maya's article was scheduled to publish in 2 days. But the board found out first. A letter arrived at Ethan's apartment, a cease and desist. Attached was a legal threat, defamation, breach of contract, violation of confidentiality. They were scared. And when powerful people are scared, they get reckless. The next morning, Maya called. "We have a problem." The editor at her publication had pulled the article, citing unverifiable sources and potential liability. Maya suspected pressure, possibly even bribery. "They want this buried," she said. "You sure you want to keep going?" "Yes," Ethan said. "Now more than ever." With no media outlet willing to publish, Ethan turned to the only avenue left, the people. He uploaded the full report to an anonymous whistleblower platform. Then he took to social media, sharing Calvin's story, the videos, the timeline. Within hours, it went viral. Hashtag, "Where is Calvin?" Hashtag, "Harborstone Truth." Hashtag, "Invisible in America." By sunset, the story had been picked up by independent journalists, human rights lawyers, and advocacy groups. Protests formed outside Pacific Grove stores. Anonymous tips flooded in, people sharing stories of relatives, friends, neighbors who had vanished in similar ways. Then came the moment no one expected. The CEO of Pacific Grove, Eleanor Strathmore, released a statement. It wasn't a denial. It was a call for accountability. "I was unaware of the extent of the Harborstone program," she said, flanked by lawyers and advisors. "I have launched a full internal investigation, suspended board members involved in the cover-up, and placed Harborstone under immediate contract termination review. Additionally, I would like to speak directly with Mr. Ethan Walker and Mr. Calvin Shaw." Ethan stared at the screen, stunned. They wanted to talk. The meeting was scheduled the next day, a private sit-down at the company's downtown headquarters. Calvin insisted on going with Ethan. "I need to say it to their face," he said, voice still hoarse, "that I exist." When they arrived, the atmosphere was tense. Protesters outside, cameras flashing, police watching. Inside, the boardroom was silent. Eleanor stood as they entered, offering a firm handshake. "Mr. Walker, Mr. Shaw, thank you for coming." Ethan didn't sit. He placed a printed photo on the conference table, Calvin, in the alley behind the cafe, handing a piece of bread to another man. "This," Ethan said, "is who you tried to erase." Eleanor nodded slowly.
I see that now.
"And I'm sorry." One of the board members, Greg Mathers, interrupted. "Let's be clear, the company's liability." Liability. Ethan snapped. Calvin was kidnapped, abused, forgotten. He almost died. And you're worried about your bottom line? Greg looked away, flustered. Eleanor turned to Calvin. "Mr. Shaw, if there's anything we can do." "Don't just do something for me," Calvin said. "Do it for the others. The ones you still have locked up. The ones who never made it back." The room fell into a heavy silence. Ethan took a deep breath. "We're not here for apologies. We're here for action. We want full transparency. Public hearings. Access to every facility tied to Harborstone. Reparations for victims. And we want you to help fund independent shelters run by the communities you've harmed." Eleanor nodded again. "Done." Greg slammed his fist on the table. "You can't agree to that. The board will never." "The board," Eleanor interrupted, "no longer speaks for this company." She pulled a folder from her briefcase and slid it to Ethan. Inside was a letter of reinstatement. "Ethan Walker, Director of Human Ethics and Social Responsibility, effective immediately." "You'll be running the investigations," Eleanor said. "With full authority." Ethan looked at Calvin, then back at her. "Then we're not done yet." That night, the news exploded again, not just about the corruption, but about redemption. A man fired for helping a homeless person was now leading the fight to expose an empire built on erasure. 3 months later, Ethan stood at the entrance of a new shelter in downtown Los Angeles. The sign above read, "The Shaw House, a place to begin again." It was named after Calvin, not because he wanted recognition, but because he embodied what this place stood for: resilience, survival, and second chances. The former alley behind the cafe was now paved, cleaned, and lit with string lights. Food trucks lined up outside. Volunteers, some former Pacific Grove employees, others formerly unhoused, greeted people by name, offering hot meals, warm clothes, and something rare: dignity. Ethan walked through the shelter doors and paused. Inside were walls painted with murals, beds with clean sheets, bookshelves, therapy rooms, job resource centers. But most importantly, it was run by the people it served. Former Harborstone detainees were now counselors and coordinators. Maya approached, clipboard in hand, smiling. "The mayor's here. Wants to speak with you." Ethan laughed softly. "Tell her I'll be right there." Maya nodded and moved off. As she left, Calvin entered the lobby, now moving with more ease, though still carrying the shadows of all he'd endured. "They're serving your favorite in the kitchen," he said, grinning. "Mac and cheese with jalapeno cornbread." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "You sure you're not just bribing me to do dishes again?" Calvin chuckled. "Maybe." They sat in the small courtyard, where the sound of laughter replaced the echoes of sirens. For a long time, they just sat in silence, watching people, real people, find warmth in a world that had once turned its back on them. "Do you ever think about how it all started?" Calvin asked. "Just one moment. A sandwich. A name." Ethan nodded slowly. "And a choice. One I'd make again." The public hearings into Harborstone were ongoing. Greg Mathers and several board members had resigned in disgrace. Lawsuits were underway, some already won. Compensation funds were being distributed to victims. Ethan's role as Director of Human Ethics had grown into something larger. He was now a federal advisor on homelessness and corporate responsibility, testifying before Congress and consulting nonprofits nationwide. But he kept his office here, at Shaw House. Because for all the headlines and accolades, this was the heart of it. He had chosen to help a man when no one else would, and in doing so, he'd helped himself too. One evening, as Ethan packed up after a long day, a woman entered the shelter, soaked from the rain. She looked scared, alone. He walked over, offering her a towel and a seat. "You're safe now," he said. "What's your name?" She looked at him for a long moment before whispering, "Jessica." Ethan nodded. "Hi, Jessica. I'm Ethan. Let's get you settled." And just like that, the cycle began again, not of suffering but of hope. He had been fired for helping a homeless man. Now he was rebuilding lives, one name, one choice, one act of compassion at a time. The world had changed, because he had dared to care. And the CEO had called, but Ethan had answered to something greater, his own humanity.